Thank you. Thanks, guys. Wow. I feel like this is the improv. I gotta do stand-up. Well, I'm honored to be here, and I'm delighted to be standing shoulder to shoulder with Candace on what I think is a truly historic development. The moral power of the Democratic Party comes from its virtually unanimous support on the part of racial minorities. If minorities desert the party, there is no Democratic Party. It's done. So the heresy that Candace is a part of, that you're a part of, is the heresy of breaking this kind of monopoly that the Democrats claim not only on the allegiance of voters, but on truth itself. On truth itself. Now, we've heard a lot since Trump about fake news. I want to say a few words about fake scholarship and fake history and fake narratives. Narratives that have been spun to camouflage the truth. Notice these activists who have been running around the South knocking down Confederate statues. And I'm going to begin right in the teeth of controversy and try to ask, what is the meaning of what they're doing? What are they trying to show by doing that? What they're really trying to show is that the crime of slavery was a crime not of the Democratic Party, but of the South. That's the reason for it, because very often when they knock down a Confederate statue, it's not even Robert E. Lee. It's some Confederate soldier who was a dirt poor farmer, a laborer, drafted into a cause that he knew nothing about. He didn't own a single slave. So something else is going on, and what's going on is the fact that they're trying to hide the fact that while the secession debate was between the North and the South, the slavery debate was between a pro-slavery Democratic Party in the North and the South and an anti-slavery Republican Party. The proof of this comes directly from the mouth of Abraham Lincoln. Because when Lincoln identified what he called the 4 bad guys of slavery, the 4 leading champions of slavery in the country, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, he names them. Roger Taney, who wrote the Dred Scott decision. Now, Roger Taney was from Maryland, and yet Lincoln counts him as a Southerner. And then there's Franklin Pierce, the former president, from New Hampshire, Northern Democrat. And James Buchanan, the sitting president, from Pennsylvania, Northern Democrat. And Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's own antagonist, from Illinois, Northern Democrat. So 3 of the 4 that Lincoln thought were the pillars upholding slavery in the United States, Northern Democrats. And yet their statues are untouched. No one pulls those statues down. Typically, when I talk about the Democratic Party's role in slavery on a campus, some professor will stand up and say, Dinesh, this is typically like a professor of Romance languages at Bowdoin College. He goes, Dinesh, your talk is very simplistic. You're pointing the finger of blame in one direction, whereas in fact, there's plenty of blame to go around. Both parties are complicit. Now, it's really important when you hear stuff like this to have the equipment, to have the knowledge to crush it. Because see, while people are entitled to their own opinions, they're not entitled to their own facts. And so this is the moment for me to say to the professor, well, in 1860, the year before the Civil War, no Republican owned a slave. Now, notice I'm not saying no Republican leader owned a slave. I'm actually saying no Republican in the United States owned a slave. And that means that all the slaves in the whole country, 4 million of them, were owned by Democrats. Now, this is fighting words. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the atheist who read through the Bible from cover to cover and at the end made a single note in the margin, important if true. Important if true. And that applies to my statement. It's important if true. And the beauty of it is it's a scientific statement in that it's totally refutable. All you have to do is give me the name of one Republican who owned a slave, and I would have to take it back. I would have to eat my words. But here, as I stand 2 years later, since I made this statement, there's not a single valid counterexample that has surfaced. Not one. A few months ago, a guy wrote me from the University of Michigan, a demographer apparently. He goes, Dinesh, I gotcha. Ulysses S. Grant inherited a slave, a solitary slave, mind you, on his wife's side. And I'm like, that was a pretty impressive effort, but I do need to point out that at the time this happened, Ulysses S. Grant was a Democrat. He moved over to the Republican Party later. Now, this is not just about slavery. If you watch my movie Death of a Nation, there is a scene that if you knew nothing about it, you would find really incredible. And that is the senior Nazis from the different departments who are making the Nuremberg laws. These are the laws that make Jews into second-class citizens. The Nazis wanted to do three things. They wanted to outlaw intermarriage between Jews and other Germans. They wanted to segregate Jews into ghettos. And they wanted to confiscate Jewish property through state-sponsored segregation. The Nazis are sitting around the table in the scene from the movie, and they say, "We are creating the world's first racist society," and they're very proud of it. And then one of the Nazis kind of raises his hand and he goes, "Actually, I studied in the United States. We are not creating the world's first racist society because the Democratic Party in America has already done that." And the Nazis are like, "Whoa." And the guy goes, you want to outlaw miscegenation? They already do in the Jim Crow South. You want state-sponsored segregation? They got it. And he names the Democratic Party. And for an American student, this is a little bit of a surprise because, why? Because we are not told in our textbooks that every segregation law from the 1880s to the 1950s was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, enforced by Democratic officials, and there is no exception to this rule. The Nazis knew it, but our students don't. So segregation was from start to finish a Democratic Party machination. In fact, it was aimed at consolidating the Democratic hold on the South. And when you have the Democrat up against the wall and you explain, wow, your party is not only the party of slavery, not only the party of segregation and Jim Crow, it's also the party of lynching, of racial terrorism, of founding, and then again reviving the Ku Klux Klan, of opposition to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. That opposition came mainly from the Democratic Party, and yet the Democratic Party has never admitted any of this. It's never apologized for it. It's never paid 1 penny in restitution for it. And when you bring all this up, the only comeback to this is, but yes, Dinesh, we all know that the parties switch sides. The big switch. The big switch. And the big switch is the linchpin of all this. Why? Because it gives the Democrats a get-out-of-jail-free card. It allows to take all the evil things they did, all the torture, all the murder, and pin it on the very people who are fighting to stop them all the way. So it's a kind of a work of genius if they can pull this off. And in order to pull it off, they have to show one simple thing. And that is that the racist Democrats, the so-called Dixiecrats, became Republicans. Now, I admit, if they could actually show a wave of Dixiecrats moving to the Republican Party, they could then legitimately argue, we might have been the bad guys then, but these are the bad guys now. And the beauty of talking about these kinds of subjects today on the campus is that we're in a position to check. I mean, I am actually being surrounded as we speak by 150 left-wing historians who are all collectively trying to refute me. And all I have going for my side, well, I think it was Winston Churchill who said something like, truth is a very incontrovertible thing. You can malign it, you can deride it, you can scorn it, you can deny it, but at the end of the day, there it is. There it is. And so, so these days we get to whip out our phone and type in the word Dixiecrat. We get all the people who joined the Dixiecrat party or who voted against the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. That's a list of about 150 people. And in my movie, boom, I put them all up on the screen with their photos. And then we say, how many of those guys moved to the Republican Party? Let's count. In the House of Representatives, one guy, Albert Watson. In the Senate, one guy, Strom Thurmond. And all the other Dixiecrats lived and stayed and died in the Democratic Party, and there are buildings in Washington, D.C. right now named after them. So the big switch never happened. Never happened. Now, I'm coming back a little bit later to answer questions, but I want to say a word in conclusion. I've just got a limited time. I want to say just a word about what I think is really the core difference between the two parties, because part of what we have to do is spread our message, make the case. I was actually, as part of my penance for my sins against the Obama administration, I was sentenced to teach English to immigrants. And one time, a woman in my class said to me, Dinesh, you know, you're into politics and all that. Can you tell me what's the difference between the two sides, the left and the right? How would you summarize it? And I realized I can't appeal to the American Constitution. She's never heard of it. I can't talk in the normal language of conservatism. I have to actually try to put this in the most basic way possible. And so I said this. I said, basically, as I see it in America, there are two sides, two parties. There is the party of the ladder, and there is the party of the rope. What's the party of the ladder? The party of the ladder believes that America is a kind of ladder, a ladder of opportunity. The government does have a job to hold the ladder. And what that means is to protect our rights, to enforce contracts, to be non-discriminatory. So the government has the job of holding the ladder. It's our job to climb. Now, how far you get on the ladder is going to depend on you and your creativity and your hard work, and it's going to depend a little bit on luck. But at the end of the day, most of it is going to be earned achievement. You'll get someplace on the ladder and you'll be able to look down and say, I did this. I played this deck of cards that I was dealt, and I was able to achieve this in life. But there's another approach, and on the first glance, it's actually more appealing. And I would call it the politics of the rope. The politics of the rope works kind of like this. Down here you have all the immigrants and minorities. And then there's a kind of a tall building. And you have a group of guys, let's call them Democrats, on top of the building. And they say, worry not, you people down there. We're going to be sending down a rope for you. And your job is really easy. You just have to hold the rope. So you can see on the first glance, it's kind of easy, right? Climbing a ladder requires climbing. Holding a rope just requires holding on. So you go, I'll go for the rope. But as you go for the rope, it suddenly begins to dawn on you, if you think about it, that you are very dependent on the people who are supposed to pull you up. In fact, if they let go, down you go. So not only do you have this dependency, but then you notice a second and even more dismaying fact. You notice that of all the other people who have gone for the rope before you, not a whole lot of them, maybe none, ever seem to get to the top. The Democrats appear to pull and then hold. They hold. And when they hold, you're kind of caught in the middle. You're in no man's land. You're too far from the ground to let go, because you might crash, and yet no one's pulling you up. You're stuck. And then it crosses your mind, maybe they like me that way. Maybe they want me stuck, because as long as I'm stuck, I'm totally dependent on them. Because in return for the meager crumbs that they're offering me, they want something that is free for me to give, but I don't have to give it. And that's my vote. And so their argument is, and the only price that you pay for becoming a person of the rope, I think at the end of the day, is not only dependency, but a certain kind of degradation of your soul. Because your achievements in life no longer depend on your efforts. You don't have that pride in saying, I did it. And I think that ultimately this is a very empowering, exhilarating message that we have to share. We've got to convince people that they should be people of the ladder, but not just preach to them. We've got to show them the ladders. We've got to show them that there are ladders, and in some cases we may even have to show them how to climb a ladder. But if we do that, then our side can't lose. The truth is on our side, and if we can combine that with a message of hope and prosperity, I think we will begin to see that day that I think Reagan, in a way, just dreamed about. A day in which all Americans are achieving the American dream. A day that Reagan called Morning in America. Thank you very much.